Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. Have you ever been stuck in a car with a narcissistic person? Share your thoughts and let's break that down. Cars are actually rather difficult places for narcissistic relationships. Cars, you might be thinking, if you don't live in a car place, and you might be actually saving yourself a world of hurt. Now, there's a few reasons for this, but I'm going to focus on one, which is how do you manage the narcissistic meltdown while you are in the car? In my work helping people navigate narcissistic relationships that they're going to stay in, it's a challenge. Staying in one of these relationships becomes about not engaging and stepping away when there's a conflict brewing, because if you don't, if the argument becomes too upsetting, too unsettling, that again, you have this permission to step away. But what if you are in a car? Especially if the car is motoring along at a pretty decent speed on a road where there are a few stops. Now, many people in a narcissistic relationship, in any relationship, would not give themselves permission to say, stop the car and get out. And it may also simply not be possible. You may be on a busy freeway or highway. The area you're in the car may not be safe. It may be in a deserted or unfamiliar area. There are many reasons that this is not viable. And then throw in there that if you did ask to be let out of the car, the narcissistic person is most likely going to say, oh, you're being so dramatic. And that can be a deterrent as well. And if you are the one who's driving, they may not be willing to get out of the car if you pull over and ask them to leave. And all those other reasons may be reasons you wouldn't ask them to leave. So again, let's just start. Drop in the comments if you've ever been stuck in a car with a raging narcissist. I have, and I have to say, it is just sort of a meltdown for your nervous system. Other than trying to get out of the car, like I said, which typically isn't an option, but it may be an option, for example, if you're close to home or you're in a place where you could afford and could safely get a ride, what's left? What do you do? Well, option one, if you're stuck in the car with them, is get into it with them. Go ahead and get into the screaming match. Well, there's problems with this approach. If you're the one driving, being raged at and gaslighting and all the rest of it, that's not exactly the safest of driving conditions. If you are not driving, being raged at and gaslighting and all the rest of it can be devastating. And their focus on raging at you, on top of the research that shows us that narcissistic people are actually more likely to drive more unsafely, at high rates of speed, intimidate other drivers, all that together means it's quite unsafe if it's the narcissistic driver who's raging at you. I've worked with a lot of people over the years who will say that narcissistic rage fests in the car rank amongst some of the most traumatic experiences they've had in the relationship because there was no escape. And typically there was often nobody to see it. However, if children are in the car, it can make the whole experience feel worse for you because now you're worried about how it's doing a number on the kids. I am not a fan of raising a problem without a solution, but when you think about even what I say about how you manage narcissistic people, again, it's about disengaging and stepping away. The car scenario takes those solutions largely away. So again, it's a problem without a really easy solution. And while people may say words can never hurt you, the people who say that have never spent an hour with a rageful narcissistic person. If you have a history of prior narcissistic relationships or childhood narcissistic relationships, the yelling may literally result in you feeling a sense of panic and perhaps even feeling physically ill. Is it practical for me to suggest that you never get into a car with a narcissistic person? I mean, I don't think that's really practical, though if you have any say in the matter, and you are, for example, going to an event where you know that there's thin-skinnedness or that they're going to have to insist on leaving early, and that would be difficult for you to leave early, if you can ever figure out a two-car solution with a narcissistic person so you don't have to drive with them, or grabbing a ride with someone else, or using a form of transportation that may have a third party in it, like a taxi, Uber, or other friends or family that the person doesn't want to be seen yelling in front of, do it. But that said, because narcissistic people can be so controlling, they'll often not go with that solution. The car situation is more common than you would think and can often set up a communication situation where the usual narcissistic coping and workaround advice goes out the window. And yes, it is one of those problems that does not have an easy solution, which means that awareness may be the much of it. My personal narcissistic management in the car technique is I look for letters on signs A, B, C, D, etc. until I get to Z. And I often get so absorbed in looking for those letters on the signs that anyone who's screaming at me, it doesn't affect me as much because I'm sort of like, there's my Z. This works if you are driving too, but being prepared, finding ways to stay grounded in yourself, recognizing that this is a them thing and not a you thing, and then after the drive, trying to find any means possible to come back down may be a way to survive these car rides from hell. If there were other passengers in the car, especially children, you do need to take the time to check in with them, make sure they're okay. Listen, any of us who have ever survived narcissistically abusive childhood car trips know that they can actually be pretty harrowing given how little power that we had then. So like I said, you just keep counting down. That ABCD trick has done me well. And honestly, like when I find my J or my Q or my Z, I kind of am so happy that in a way I'm sort of strangely smiling despite someone raging at me. So whatever that trick may be, whatever little game you can play with yourself, you got to find a way to just kind of retreat for a moment. Like I said, unless you want to get into it with them. But either way, the car represents a really unique situation in narcissistic relationship where a lot of the don't go deep and other tools of surviving narcissistic encounters kind of go out the window. Hope that's helpful and be safe.